Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. I hope you guys enjoyed yesterday's take of Paris-Nice Stage 8 because today I want to go back there again and dissect Jumbo-Visma's tactics throughout the stage once the TV coverage comes on at 67 kilometers to go. Now, Beyond the Coverage this week is all about the build-up to Milan-San Remo, but these past races like Trino-Adriatico, Paris-Nice, and Milan-Torino. I want to bring up Milan-Torino. I don't want to be a spoiler because some of you guys might not have seen the results. But the winner today of Milan-San Remo, of Milan-Torino, we have to bring up here on the Butterfly Effect because we have to ask ourselves, should the winner of today's Milan-Torino be on the team when we're talking about Milan-San Remo coming up here on Saturday? I believe he should. Why not add him in there? But like I said, I don't want to spoil it, so you guys got to do your own research there and figure that out. When I dissect Jumbo-Visma's tactics from Paris-Nice on Stage 8, this will start bringing into a little bit of Milan-San Remo and why I think Jumbo-Visma always makes a bunch of different mistakes. They were over-aggressive on Stage 8 way more than they had to. Now, when I looked at the comments when I went to bed last night, Andrew there, and I'll put up his comment and we'll show the post there, he asked the question, why was it that when Danny Martinez went up the road, why was it that when Wout van Aert caught him, did Wout van Aert still start setting just a devastating tempo at the front? And I commented to Andrew and I said, I'll bring it up on the show on Beyond the Coverage. And Andrew, you were 100% right. I'm 100% behind you. There was absolutely no reason for Wout van Aert to continue the heavy pace setting on the front and keep that group of five together going over the penultimate climb. No reason whatsoever. Remember, when we go back and look at that group, Steven Kruijswijk's back in that group. Now, I got ahead of myself there, so I want to go back to kilometer 67 when Stage 8 came on television and I'm sitting on the couch. Now, at 67 kilometers to go, when it's Christophe Laporte on the front, he's pulling a pretty good pace there, and we could see the riders in the back in the second group and stuff, and they're all sprinting 100%, trying to close that gap to get up to that Primož Roglic, Jumbo-Visma-led Christophe Laporte group up there. At this point in time, Sean Kelly, the announcer for GCN, he's marvelous. He brings up the little tactic there. He goes, I don't understand why Christophe Laporte pulled so hard and then dropped himself off the front of the group. Sean Kelly's 100% correct. Guys, when you're watching and Christophe Laporte's at the front and it's all strung out, it's in two groups, there's no reason whatsoever for Christophe Laporte to be setting a pace this fast that just blows him off the front of the group. When I was watching it, immediately when I watched Christophe Laporte, and he was only on television for about 700 meters, I think, and then he blew and pulled off to the right and dropped anchor. Now, at that point in time, when you see him do it, and there's nobody in front, no one, not one single rider from Paris-Nice is up the road in front of Primož Roglic. At that point in time, if there's nobody in front, and your weakest rider out of five guys from Jumbo-Visma is Christophe Laporte, hey, Christophe, back the throttle down. Back it down. There's no reason. You don't need full gas at this point in time. Nobody is up the road. The number one rule on the Butterfly Effect is always to stay with your team for as long as you can. Now, I use it more often to say that the leader and his domestiques need to stay with the leader as long as he can. And this is the same reason. There's no reason at all for Christophe Laporte to go 100% and then blow up. If he backed off, maybe he rides all the way to the summit of the climb and nobody attacks. Maybe somebody attacks, maybe nobody attacks. We don't know what's going to happen. At this point in time, though, Christophe Laporte, you have to make the other teams be aggressive before you get back on the throttle. Instead, he throttles himself with an invisible person up the road that has absolutely no threat on the general classification because there is nobody there. He throttles himself to death and pulls off to the right and drops anchor, breaking the number one rule on the Butterfly Effect. Now, let's talk about what happens afterwards. We're going to see, of course, Steven Kruijswijk ride the front, and he's going to ride all the way to about 500 meters to go. During that time when he's riding the front, he's setting an okay tempo, but it's not blazing fast, and you know because now those two groups are going to come together. So, Steven Kruijswijk's going to ride to just under 500 meters to that summit, and then we're going to see the look, and it's Rowan Dennis. Gives a look over to the left side of his shoulder like that, eyeballs the Ineos Grenadiers team, and he knows what he has to do, so he's going to take over the front. We're going to see a little bit of acceleration from Rowan Dennis, but this is a perfect time to do an acceleration because they want to make sure they go over the top with Primož Roglič at the very, very front of that group so that they can control the descent and control the speeds. Now, Rowan Dennis does a great job. He accelerated the last 400 meters to make sure his team gets over the front. They are, as they're going down the crazy technical switchback descent, you can tell he's going slow and easy through all the turns and riding it like Rowan Dennis always does. Rowan Dennis' tactics normally are spot on every time I've watched him. Now, when he gets to the bottom, then we're going to see Steven Kruijswijk take over the front, and he's going to pick up the pace. I'm not exactly certain why he's doing it, but you know the pace is a little bit of fast because you'll see the gap to Rowan Dennis many times as they're coming out of the corners. That means Steven Kruijswijk up there is a little bit fast through the corners. He's on the pedals a little bit too much, and we know he's going fast because behind it's Pierre Latour, the French rider from Total Energy that flatted, has a teammate with him, and is never able to return to that front group. So if a GC rider, granted Pierre Latour is having some problems with the legs at this moment, but if he can't get back up to that group and nobody's attacking, then you know that Steven Kruijswijk's riding at the front a little bit too fast. Just before we start the penultimate climb, it's still Steven Kruijswijk on the front, and he's still gapping Rowan Dennis. Now when the climb starts, the penultimate climb starts, Steven Kruijswijk's on the front until shortly afterwards, it's Omar Fraley that sets a blitzer in pace, and now Ineos' team tactics is setting into motion here on plan A of trying to blow this race up and launch Danny Martinez. Next big mistake here from Jumbo-Visma, no problem. They followed Omar Fraley's pace setting. That was fine. When Martinez attacks, when Wout van Aert goes across and closes the gap, first off, they didn't have to close the gap, okay? I brought the Saturn jersey out here for one reason, just so I can explain to you guys that I've been in these situations. I was there in 2003 with Saturn riding at the Redlands Classic. Jonathan Vaughters goes up the road in a group, I'll call it 5 or 7 guys. I don't remember the exact number, but Jonathan Vaughters was our biggest threat along with Roland Green on the general classification at this 2003 Redlands Classic. Vaughters is in that front group. We have Nathan O'Neill. Nathan O'Neill is on the kind of form that I was on, so we had a threat up there that can win, and he's going to free ride it, right? Now, behind, I had Trent Klasna, like a brother to me. He's my teammate. I love the guy. He's fantastic. I've trained, stayed at his house. Unbelievable guy. I tell him to get on the front and start setting tempo, but don't bring the brake back. Instead, he goes full throttle. And Trent was a monster on the pedals, and he does full throttle and pulls that group back 5-10 kilometers later. And now I'm furious. I'm over there at the front yelling at Klasna, what are you doing? Stop pulling it back. And he keeps pulling it back full gas until he closes the gap. Then once the gap closes, I'm yelling at him. And like I said, we're family. Trent and I are brothers. So I'm yelling at him, going off at him. And he goes, what are you talking about? Vaughters was in that group. I said, I know Vaughters was in that group. I wanted Vaughters in that group. I wanted Vaughters to be in that group to the start of the Oak Glen Mountain, and then we were going to catch him right at the bottom. I was going to drop him, and any hope for him winning general classification was over. Now, Trent, you have cost me effort because now he's still going to be good on Oak Glen, and I'm going to have to drop him, and whatever time gap I get on him is going to be much smaller than if I dropped him at the very beginning of the climb. So this is the exact same scenario here. When we're talking about Danny Martinez attacking, you didn't have to bring him back. Well, Primož Roglič, you didn't have to follow it. Wout didn't have to follow it. You still had teammates. You could have let him go. You could have let him go, gain 30 seconds over the top of the climb, maybe even 1 minute. Who cares? You still had Steven Kruijswijk. You would have had Rowan Dennis there. You would have had Wout van Aert, we know for sure, and Primož would have been there. Now, remember, if Christophe Laporte hadn't dropped off on the third climb of today's stage, and he saved his legs, maybe he could have rode that whole descent, and then you're talking about 5 guys starting this climb, and one of those guys could have went back to the car, got extra food, bottles, juice, Cokes, everything, and handed it off to Primoz Roglic throughout that descent. Instead, nobody did because Christophe Laporte blew up. Steven Kruijswijk set a fast pace throughout the valley there before the penultimate climb with Martinez's attack. Wout van Aert, Primoz Roglic follow it right away. And then the next mistake from Jumbo-Visma. This one's a catastrophic mistake. Every mistake up to this point were small ones that were starting to add up to why we see a bad Primoz Roglic on Col d'Ez. But this next mistake was huge. And this is why I responded to Andrew in the comments and why Andrew was spot on and correct. When Wout van Aert caught Martinez, all he had to do then is sit up. Sit up, back off the throttle. Wout's problems throughout all of the last 2 years when we're talking about the big classics, why he hasn't won more big classics, why he wasn't Olympic champion, why the world championships went the way they went. Everything they're trying to do, everything Wout van Aert's trying to do is always with aggression. Full force, stomp on you, crush their face down, beat the guy down to the ground and then bury him. But you don't have to do it. Wout, at this point in time, if you backed off when you caught Martinez, if you eased up, if Steven Kruijswijk came back on, if Rowan Dennis came back on, what do you think's going to happen? You go over the top of the climb, those 2 riders ride the next 20 kilometers instead of Wout van Aert up there all by himself. There's riders there now to get food to Primoz Roglic. He doesn't have to panic. He can send Rowan Dennis, Steven Kruijswijk, or Wout van Aert back to get a bunch of food because there's only 20, 30 guys left in the race. They come back, they feed him a ton of calories. You get to the start of the Col d'Ez, you catch Danny Martinez at the bottom of the hill of Col d'Ez. He's done. He's over. There's nothing left. The only person you have to deal with now is Simon Yates, who's way overdressed, by the way. But, okay, I'm not Simon Yates. Maybe it was really cold, so that's just my opinion. But when Simon Yates attacks, now you got a Wout van Aert who's never touched the front. Now you got Primoz Roglic with a ton of calories. Now you got Rowan Dennis or Steven Kruijswijk. Sure, one of them can do the first 500 meters of Col d'Ez for sure. And that move is neutralized. Primoz Roglic goes over the top of the climb. He controls the pace all the way down the descent. They come into the finish line. Wout van Aert wins the last stage of Paris-Nice. And it's a complete domination show with 3 guys winning stage 1, 3 guys winning in the time trial. Primoz Roglic winning yesterday stage 7. Primoz Roglic leaving today stage 8 after Wout van Aert wins. And he leaves with no doubt in his mind whatsoever. Because certainly when he left stage 8, after getting dropped from Simon Yates up that climb and drool hanging all the way off his chin, certainly he left stage 8 with a little bit of doubt. Myself, I would have been like, well, it's just calories, no worries. But there's still always a doubt in that head. Instead, if they'd raced it perfect, won the stage, left the race, they would probably have just dominated Paris-Nice from start to finish. Primoz Roglic leaving with no doubts in his mind. And now they're getting ready for Milan-San Remo that's coming up on Saturday. Now, Saturday's race, when we're talking about Jumbo-Visma, normally I'm saying they have to keep their team all together with Wout van Aert. But on Saturday, here's the problem. When we look at last year's Milan-San Remo, Caleb Ewan was amazing and climbing with legs of angels. I mean, he was unbelievable on the suppressor and Poggio in last year's Milan-San Remo. So, now Primoz Roglic is the one time where Primoz Roglic is going to have to be very aggressive, going to have to make the decisive split when Tadej Pogačar puts in his massive attacks. He's going to have to go up there, possibly even work a little bit with Tadej Pogačar in hopes that Wout van Aert can somehow find a way back up to him. Because there's no way Wout van Aert wants to come to the finish line with Caleb Ewan if he has the kind of form that he had at last year's Milan-San Remo. So, keep in mind, when we're talking Wout van Aert, normally I say always keep the team together when we're talking about the results when you see at Paris-Nice. But now at Milan-San Remo, he's got to have some help from Jumbo-Visma setting the pace on the climbs before we get to the coast. Extremely difficult, so Caleb Ewan suffers. And most important, when we're talking about the suppressa, when they're going up that climb, if you see that Caleb Ewan is just absolutely fantastic and in the front group of 5 or 10 of the peloton, then you know you have to be incredibly aggressive and set that race on fire when we get on the suppressa. If you see Caleb Ewan's not there, you have to switch plans. This is what Jumbo-Visma is not good at. They're not good at switching plans. I believe they set Paris-Nice Stage 8 as the plan to be aggressive throughout the stage, and then they didn't switch. And then what they need to do at Milan-San Remo is going to be figure out what kind of fitness Caleb Ewan has and then set the plan according to what Caleb Ewan's fitness is. Because if he can make it over the Cipressa and the Poggio, you don't want to go to the line with a Caleb Ewan. But if he's getting dropped on the Cipressa, you do want to just tow Wout van Aert to the finish and let him sprint and win Milan-San Remo. Fantastic race. We're looking forward to it as the weekend starts on Saturday. The butterfly effect is running hot throughout this week, so make sure you guys like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next edition, and then be ready for the butterfly effect on Saturday for Milan-San Remo. Like and subscribe. See you guys real soon.